We all interact with AI like it's some kind of magic, right? It feels clean, digital, almost weightless. But here's the fascinating part. There is a massive, very real industrial machine humming just beneath the surface. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back that digital curtain and diagnose the very physical, very real cost of all that supposed magic. I mean, just let that sink in. This is not science fiction. It's happening right now in the Nevada desert, and it perfectly captures the mental gap we're all experiencing. The demand for AI is so huge, so intense, that we are literally re-engineering the planet to keep up. It's a pretty stark reminder that every single time you ask an AI to write an email, you are, in a very real way, tapping into the Earth's molten core. And this is where it gets really interesting for anyone running a business. See, these gigantic infrastructure costs, they don't just disappear. They get passed down to us, the users, in ways that are deliberately abstract and honestly pretty hard to see, until suddenly they're not. So the big question we have to ask is, are you already paying this hidden price without even knowing it? Okay, so what's so fascinating to us as behavioral observers isn't just the money, it's the human side of all this. We're seeing a massive cognitive bias, a kind of predictable blind spot that affects even the smartest, most strategic people. It's a brand new case study in how our minds process, or more often, fail to process, costs we can't see. So let's put on our diagnostic hats for a minute and really examine this thing. We're calling this invisible infrastructure syndrome. Basically, it's our brain's tendency to treat digital tools as if they live in this frictionless, consequence-free world, completely separate from physical reality. It's a classic case of abstraction, right? We see the nice, clean software on our screen, but our brain just edits out the miles of cables and the massive energy grid humming away just out of sight. So what are the symptoms? How do you know if you have this? Well, you might be showing signs if you've brought on a new AI tool and only looked at that flat monthly subscription fee. If the question, wait, how much physical compute are we actually burning through, has never even crossed your mind, then yeah, that's a classic case of this cognitive blind spot. But here is the most important part. This is not a failure of intelligence. Not at all. In fact, smart, strategic people are especially susceptible to this because, in a way, our brains are just wired for it. Let's dig into the specific psychological traps that make this invisible infrastructure so seductively easy to ignore. Our research really points to three main things. First, there's the bias itself. Our brains are just notoriously bad at caring about things we can't physically see or touch. Then you've got sunk cost momentum. Once we've bought into a tool, it's just psychologically painful to reevaluate. It's easier to keep going. And finally, there's this really fascinating dose of magical thinking, this cozy belief that some big tech company will just figure it all out and absorb the costs for us. And look, this isn't just a theory, it's incredibly well documented. Pioneers in behavioral economics like Thaler and Sunstein have shown time and again that when costs are hidden or delayed, we predictably, systematically underestimate their real impact. By a lot. You could almost say the AI industry's pricing models are a masterclass in exploiting this very human flaw. Okay, so let's shift gears from the psychological diagnosis to the cold, hard data. It's time to make these invisible costs visible because, wow, when you actually see the numbers, the true scale of our collective blind spot becomes pretty staggering. Just look at how simple and stark this is. A single query to a generative AI tool uses nearly 10 times the electricity of a standard Google search. Now, stop and think about that. Multiply that difference by every single query your team makes every single day. That gap between what we think is happening and what's really happening, well, it adds up incredibly fast. And it hits both the planet and your bank account. Let's look at a real-world case. A company thought its AI chatbot was costing them a pretty manageable $300 a month. Then they did an audit. The shocking reality? The true cost was $4,300 a month. That extra $4,000 was buried in abstract API fees, a direct bill for the physical compute power that nobody was even tracking. That's the moment we're talking about, that jolt of cognitive dissonance when the magic collides with the hard reality of math. And the syndrome shows up in other ways too. Take this marketing agency that went all in on AI. They got rid of their freelance writer budget, patting themselves on the back for being so efficient, but they completely failed to account for a massive hidden cost, their own team's time. Once they actually tracked the hours their senior people were spending prompting, editing, and fact-checking the AI's work, they found out their efficient new system was actually costing them 162% more.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the syndrome, we understand the psychology behind it, and we've seen the real-world damage. But look, a diagnosis is not a dead end. It is always the first step toward taking back control. So now let's talk about the treatment plan, the actual actionable things you can do to manage these invisible costs and overcome the bias.
The very first step is simple. You have to make the invisible visible. You start treating compute power like any other resource in your business, like office supplies or travel. You give it a budget. And this isn't a guess. You look at your past usage, you set an intentional limit, and just by doing that, you force a huge cognitive shift. This simple act of measuring it short-circuits the bias and starts a conversation about value that just wasn't happening before. The next step is to stop using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Our bias is to throw the newest, most powerful tool at every single problem. But not every task needs the immense energy of a large language model. You know, a simple, cheap FAQ page can handle most basic questions. The goal here is to consciously save the expensive, high-compute AI for the really complex problems, where it truly delivers unique value. It's about shifting from just reflexively automating to strategically applying. And here's a super simple mental tool for your whole team. Before you instinctively turn to AI, just run this quick 3-question audit in your head. Is this actually faster? When you factor in all the editing and fixing, is the quality truly as good or better? And is the real physical compute cost justified by the value you're getting? If you can't get a confident yes on all 3, that's your signal to pause and maybe choose a different tool for the job. So when you boil it all down, the real treatment is a fundamental shift in behavior. We have to consciously move away from this sort of childlike view of AI as consequence-free magic and instead adopt the much more mature perspective of AI as powerful infrastructure. And infrastructure always requires active, strategic management. And this slide really lays out the 2 mindsets perfectly. On the left, you've got the magic mindset, the belief that AI is infinite and the costs are somebody else's problem. And on the right, you have the infrastructure mindset, the understanding that AI is a finite physical resource and that its costs must be actively managed. I can tell you the most successful and resilient companies out there, they are already living on the right side of this slide. Now, let's be really clear. Our diagnosis here is not meant to scare you. It's meant to empower you. Understanding your own cognitive biases is what gives you agency over them. Acknowledging these hidden costs doesn't make your AI strategy weaker. It actually makes it way more robust and sustainable. The moment you start tracking your usage is the moment you stop being a passive consumer and you become an active, strategic manager of a really powerful resource. So, we'll leave you with this final thought. The overloaded power grids, the hidden API fees, this isn't some far-off future problem. It is a present reality, baked into the tools that you are using every single day. The invisible bill is already sitting on the table. The only real question left is, are you going to be the one in your organization with the clarity to finally see it?